Skype or whatever. This may seem like a pain, but for recording quality purposes, I recommend each person recording their own audio track. I know many people will just record the Skype call or record a single kind of track with their with the feedback that is coming into their headphones or whatever as the second microphone. And if that happens, like, it's just harder to edit. When you have people, like multiple people having their own tracks, it's much easier to edit out noise because the noise is not all combined on a single track. It's much easier to edit out pauses or issues that someone has. And a lot of times, I'm sure you've all had the Skype issue where someone sounds like a robot, the connection is bad. If they're natively recording their own audio, that's not going to be what they actually sound like. So, big advantage there if you're doing recording at a distance. Record in mono rather than stereo, especially if you're just starting out. Like, if you have been going for a while and you thought of some like ways to use like stereo panning, or there's like a certain level of quality you want to achieve, then do stereo. But like for file size purposes, recording in mono is what I would recommend. And honestly, you don't really lose anything because you're just talking into a microphone. It actually helps, like, sometimes when people record in stereo or release things in stereo, certain people, when they talk, will only come through one channel, so you'll only hear them in the right ear. If you convert everything to mono, that's not an issue. And again, even if you have music in the show to introduce your podcast or for kind of interstitial, like, I found that it really doesn't affect the quality all that much. And most people are just listening to podcasts on earbuds or like crappy computer speakers. So I would say the grand majority of them aren't going to be listening on sound systems where that will make a huge difference to their listening experience, the mono versus stereo. So, and you want to keep in mind, like, people that are streaming your show, that have data caps, that live in places with poor internet, rural places or other countries where the internet sucks. You want to keep the file size of your episodes down. So again, I would recommend releasing them as mono tracks. Normalization, I won't show how to do this, but you can read, it's very quick and easy read on like the Audacity how-to page. It's a really easy thing to do, and oftentimes when you record, you won't be at the same consistent volume. People will laugh loudly, or some people will talk quietly, and you really want to make sure that when people are loud, that they're not too loud, that they're not like hurting people's ears, or even possibly worse than that, the recording's not getting garbled because of how loud they are. And so normalization, what it does to the track is it will sort of cap the loudness of the WAV file at a certain point. If you cap it at 0.1 decibels, then it will be as loud as it can possibly be without causing any clipping to the track. If you're recording in Audacity and you see red, like the waveform is blue, but if at any point you see red lines or big sections of red, then you've recorded so loud that there will be clipping. And I would err on the side of recording at a louder volume rather than a quieter volume, just because it is easier to fix clipping with normalization than it is to like bring up someone's low volume but keep the ambient noise down. So when you're recording in Audacity, I think you should record, the mic volume at like 90% or higher, but like your mileage may vary. It's a thing you can test. Noise reduction. I think it'd be helpful to actually show this process happening in Audacity. This is a very quick video, only a couple minutes. I didn't want to like make this a convo about showing videos, but I think this will be beneficial, especially if you've been working on it in Audacity.
and I am going to be showing you guys how to remove background noise or unwanted background noise within your Audacity audio files. So I purposefully left a little silence there so we can kind of select what we need to select in the audio file. And as you can see, we're in Audacity here on the screen. And as you can see, I'm recording audio right now as we speak. Now, in order for us to remove background noise, we got to select the noise that we want to remove. So we have to select the unwanted noise. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. And then if we go back over here in the timeline and we look right here, we have a little blank area. Now, I am in a studio where it's not that much background noise, but let's just say there is a bunch of background noise right here. Now, you want that background noise to be removed from within the whole project, so not just this area here. So what you're going to want to do is select the unwanted audio right here, so select the unwanted noise right here, and then go up to where you see Effect, and then go all the way down until you see Noise Reduction. Now under Noise Reduction, you're going to see these two steps here. Now under Step 1, you're going to see something that says Get Noise Profile. Now that's going to be the button that we're going to want to press, but before we do that, we want to look at Step 2 down here. Now, Noise Reduction in decibels right here. So if you want it to be reduced all the way, go all the way down to 0. If you want it to be, all the way up, that'll be a little louder, whatever it may be. So the further left you slide that slider, the more of it will be reduced. The further right you slide that slider, the louder or more prominent that noise will be. So normally you want to keep that right around 6 to 12, but remember, if you go too low, it's going to start removing some of the vocals that you don't want it to remove, and because of that, your audio is going to start sounding a little strange. So leave that right around 12. I'm going to go ahead and leave that back at 12. And then sensitivity, leave it there at 6, and then frequency, leave that at 0, and then go ahead and click the Get Noise Profile button. Now, we have captured the noise profile, which is this area here that we have selected. Alright, and the next thing you're going to want to do is select the whole audio file. So go ahead and hit Command or Control A on your keyboard, or go up to Edit, and then go down to where you see Select All, okay? So once we've selected all of our audio, by doing that, we then want to go back up to Effect, and then the first thing we're going to see is something that says Repeat Noise Reduction. Go ahead and click on that, Repeat Noise Reduction. That will take that noise that you've selected and remove it to the degree that you've chosen to remove it, and that way that background noise will no longer be in your audio. So now if we play that audio back, though I purposefully left a little silence there so we can kind of select, as we can hear, it's a nice crisp audio file.
Okay, so, whoops. So that's that process, and again, sorry to yawn, instructional video. When you actually need to look at it, you could just YouTube, Audacity noise reduction. But that's it. And in order to make that process easy on yourself, what my friends and I will do is at the beginning of every recording session, hit record, but leave a 5-second, 6-second silence at the beginning so that it can capture the ambient noise in the room that we want to edit out. Because we're using this mic, it's not filtered, so it is going to capture, even if you think, wow, it's so quiet, there will be a little something that you'll want to edit out. And when you export your podcast, when you've done all the editing, when you put all the tracks together and just put everything in, you want to export. Again, this is a file size consideration. As a 64 megabits per second MP3, which seems quite low, if you're like me, you grew up with, you're all younger than me, so when Napster and all this peer-to-peer services was a thing, and music sharing was a thing that was just kind of coming out, 128 was the standard for an MP3 that you want to look for. You want to get as higher 192 if you could for quality, but 128 was this is listenable. But that is a music recording. When it comes to, again, podcast recordings, this will get the file size down. For your listeners, they will appreciate that. And it really, the quality, I've gone back, so I used to, I would export them at 128 or 192 or even higher. And I listened to those versus these, and it really, not a noticeable difference in terms of what we're doing, just releasing mono recordings that are mostly talking. And CBR stands for constant bit rate, which is, again, and keep the file size down, and as opposed to VBR, which is variable bit rate, which is what you want to export your music in. So this is the most technical and specific part, I think. So those are very simple, easily implemented editing tricks that I use, but you may want more. There may be other issues. There may be specific noise you want to edit out. You may want to make your, people sound like aliens. If you're doing a narrative podcast, you want to give them like Daft Punk voices. I don't know. So ways to do that, but covering them here would take us down a long tangent. So you can look at the Audacity support manual here, manual.audacityteam.org. It has very useful, very well-edited wiki style thing. And also, like I just showed you, YouTube and Google. If you already know what you want to do, you're just not sure how to make Audacity bend to your will, then if you search for it, you'll find it. There's tons of great personalities that just devote their entire YouTube channels to teaching Audacity stuff. So if you seek those out, it will not be long before you find good stuff. So more post-production stuff, in addition to editing the tracks that you have recorded, you might want to put in sound effects, right? Doorknob ring, or doorbell ringing, plane taking off, record scratch, glass breaking, morning zoo soundboard type boing stuff. It would be really corny. I don't know, but for all that sort of stuff, you can look at freesound.org. That is all royalty-free sound for you to use, and in most of these, they'll have the specific information on how to credit them, but most of them, you don't even have to credit them in. They'll say you don't even have to credit us in your recording, just in the description of your recording, be it on YouTube or in your iTunes show notes or whatever. Sound Text is a really kind of cool and useful site that I found. You can make this Google robot say anything that you want in any accent that you want, which I think is really fun, and so I use that. And for music, there's a lot of royalty-free stuff. Ben Sound I've used plenty of times. Purple Planet, again, they will just say, hey, just shout us out in your video or audio description, and you can use whatever song you want. And this way, if you release your podcast on YouTube, the copyright dogs, their lovely robotic algorithms will not, clamp down your video, give you copyright strikes, say, oh, your video cannot be seen by people in America, Canada, UK, restrict it, or if you're trying to use this as a money-making venture, if the copyright dogs sniff out copyrighted audio, then you won't be able to monetize that video. And that process is a real pain and takes a long time to undo. So I would recommend, especially if you want to put your podcast on YouTube, stay away from copyrighted, well-known music, especially American music. SoundCloud, speaking of this, we talked about before, big platform for independent musicians. A bunch of the stuff you find on there is not copyrighted, so you can kind of talk to the artist, like, hey, I want to use your song as the intro to my podcast, it's okay, yes, and YouTube will not bother you, and you're squared away as far as having a written agreement with the artist. You're not violating the copyrights. All right, so hosting. Files have to live somewhere once you've exported them for people to access them for listening. Free options, which are the important ones for our purposes. There are two, archive.org and YouTube. Drawbacks exist for both of these platforms. For YouTube, you do not get an RSS feed from it. And so if you just have your podcast there and don't have the RSS feed component, you won't be able to get your podcast in the Apple Store, Google Play Store, that sort of stuff. And people won't be able to subscribe to it with podcatchers. They can subscribe to YouTube, but not these other ways. Archive.org, also, I mean, with YouTube, you can't, if you don't host the files anywhere else, they won't exist as just an audio file. So that's like, again, you won't be able to have an RSS feed that plays well with Apple Pods. Archive, it doesn't generate a feed for you, but like you're uploading your audio files and they exist as audio files. You have the links there, and when you create an RSS feed, you can just use these archive links. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a feed that will get your podcast in Apple Podcasts, etc. YouTube, that option's totally cut off. But I mean, it's good to have your podcast on YouTube, I think. I mean, there's a totally different kind of consumer, different fan base that you can generate. But there's equally, I think, many people that would prefer audio only, would prefer to download your podcast from and subscribe to it on their podcatcher and just listen to it on their phone, on their commute or whatever, without using data. Archive also does not have live stats. Like they keep some limited stats, but they're not updated regularly. You can of course get how many downloads, but it's maybe once a day they'll change it. And they don't break it down either by like demographic or time. All these things that, you know, eventually if your show gets popular, you really want to figure out. But if you're just starting out and you have, you know, a few people that know about it, you really just care about like that number of downloads going up, and Archive will tell you. The non-free, lots of podcasters use Libsyn. It's probably like one of the top, and it's, I think, newer than the rest of the, or sorry, older than the rest of these. It's been around. A lot of longtime podcasters use it. The stats are great that it gives you. You can have custom album art for each episode, whereas if you do this a different way that we'll talk about, the entirely free way, you've got your one album art, and you're going with that all the way from episode 1 to episode 100. SoundCloud, similar, like if you host your podcast there. I think there are like $15 plans for both of these, $50 a month. I believe that's the lowest tier, but you'll need to, you can check me on that. This is shaking. I guess because I touched it. And SoundCloud, a big plus that is like you have the really nice player. Like the SoundCloud embedded player just looks so pretty. I love it. That's an attractive thing for people looking for your podcast on their web browser. Or you can do sites like Podomatic and Podbean, which we talked about before. Like they will plug you into their own database, and you'll be in their system, so you might be a little bit more discoverable to people using those platforms. And you get really nice web pages for your show with those platforms, and some really cool widgets to embed on your blog or whatever. But yes, you want to get your files hosted somewhere as audio, as MP3.